Good evening, fellow Plexers. Tonight's video is for Jason, who's having trouble with a Linux server Plex container in Unraid with a 12th gen Intel i5 12600K CPU and 64 gigabytes of RAM. He says he's using 8 gigabytes for RAM transcoding and that he's set up correctly, and that he was afraid of updating the Plex Docker container for a long time, and when he did, things went haywire. He's got it narrowed down to the Plex container, and he doesn't really know what to do next. Unfortunately, Jason, I cannot diagnose Unraid issues for you. I'm pretty good with Plex issues, so I've got some ideas. But my main mode of thought is always comparative troubleshooting to try to narrow things down, which you've already done a little bit to know that it's the Plex container that is messing things up. So first of all, this is the hardware I've run my Plex server on since November of 2023. It's an 11th gen Intel NUC with a fabulous Iris Xe iGPU in it for Plex hardware transcoding. I have 64 gigabytes of RAM like you do, and I use 32 gigabytes. I'm sorry, my new system has 64 gigabytes. This has 32, and I use 16 gigabytes of RAM transcoding, or I used that when this ran my main Plex server. Recently, I've bought a new 14th gen Asus NUC and slid my Unraid server under that. Unfortunately, I kind of jumped the gun technology-wise. The Linux kernel of Unraid 7 is not new enough to support the Meteor Lake iGPU in my fabulous new 14th gen processor, so I don't have hardware acceleration. Hopefully, the first beta of Unraid 7.1 will give me that ability back. I'm not often ever ahead of the technology curve. So what I did is I spun up a second test Plex server on my older hardware. Now my main server points to media on my Synology NAS. It does not have any Unraid storage. This system has a rusty laptop, 1 terabyte hard drive in it for a test Plex server setup. And of course, the container's set up exactly the same as it was on my regular system. So my first thought is, have you run a mem test? I think you can run that right from the Unraid boot screen. And if not, just make a Ventoy flash drive and go find Memtest Plus, the ISO, and throw it on the Ventoy, boot off from it, and run the mem test. That's the first thing I did with my new 14th gen Asus NUC with 64 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM. Well, first thing is I booted into Ubuntu off from my Ventoy flash drive just to play around, just to make sure the sound worked, the video worked, the network worked, and the wireless radio worked, and all that jazz. And then I rebooted into Memtest Plus and let it do the regular memory test. I started it in the evening, checked the next morning. It completed without errors. It did 4 passes. It took 6 hours. So at the very least, I would do that. But because you're having trouble, you might want to do it again with the extended test, which might take 48 hours. At this point, you've already got problems. Rule out the memory completely. If you do have issues, you can run the mem test with just one stick versus the other. Because if you do discover bad memory, you've got 64, run it for a while with 32 and see if everything is stable then. So the next thought is, once you either clear or condemn your memory, is to check all of your NVMe drives. So right here I can go to cache, click the self-test, and do the extended self-test on all your NVMe drives. I don't know if you have any other network storage, but you might want to remove Plex's access from your local media storage under Unraid and point it at other storage. Even if you had to plug a USB flat or a USB drive in with 10 movies on it, plug something in and switch Plex to a different type of storage than your array. I mean, it's easy. Just unhook that in the Docker container and then add it back later. So let's start with that. I don't know where I am. I got a bunch of test servers running. Okay, so this is my main server, a test container on both my Synology NASs. This is where my regular Plex media lives. This server points back to media on this Synology NAS, and this is the test Unraid server we're looking at right now. So, before you disconnect your access to your shared media folder on your Unraid setup to test maybe a USB or network storage on it, go into your settings, your library settings here, and turn off any scanning of your library periodically. Now on this server, I probably should have these two checked because the media is local and it can detect any changes. On my normal setup, because my media is remote, those won't do a thing for me. I have to do a time scan, and I do it every 2 hours. So just turn off any automatic or time scanning, and also turn off empty trash automatically after every scan and save the changes. That way, when you disconnect your Plex media, as long as you don't scan one of the involved libraries, you'll keep all the metadata until you reconnect it. So you can simply go into, let me just stop this. You can go into your settings. Let's get the advanced view. And you can just remove this path and add a new path, maybe to USB media or network storage. You can use the unassigned devices to get to your network storage. And if you need help doing that, I've got a video that shows you how to do it, at least for a Synology share. All right, so this is the next part I want to get at. Let's compare your settings to mine. So this is the Linux server Plex container. Let's double check your extra parameters. I've already got them typed in here. So this is how they normally look. There's just a space separating the first one from the second and the second from the third. And here they're broken up. So this enables the hardware acceleration for the container to access the iGPU. And I got all this from Ibercorp. This uses 16 gigabytes of the 32 gigabytes of RAM for hardware transcoding. Now on my upgraded system, I'm doing 24 gigabytes out of the 64. And then this is just no health check stuck on the end. So you say you've got hardware transcoding enabled properly. I've seen other tutorials. Excuse me, let me get back here, where you have to add a variable to do that. No variable is necessary besides these lines under extra parameters, just like this. And then back in your Plex settings. Okay, so that's stopped. Let me show it to you with my regular server. It's the same thing, transcoder. You just put /tmp and save the changes. I think, if I remember right, the Ibercorp video suggested bumping this up from the fault 160 to 180. I just have no problem streaming on my server before I made that change, with the old container on the Synology NAS, or after making that change. Everything just works perfectly for me. So that's how you get hardware acceleration and using your memory for RAM transcoding. Okay, so let's just go through this. You can try my extra parameter line. It's really Ibercorp's. There is no CPU pinning going on. Network type is host. I don't use tailscale. The command shell, console shell command is bash. Privilege is off. So this is the path to my media under Unraid. I don't use a claim token. I just claim a server manually. And let's just double check this. When you set this container up, it's marked user. If you want to go to your cache drive, you have to change it to cache. And that's about it. Very simple, and it just works beautifully for me. Now, I can't remember everything I've done to prep this, but it wasn't a lot. I just kind of followed the prompts. So I have plenty of room for the container to run. I'm not even sure where those settings are. Well, I'm not going to look for them. I'm just going to assume that the space for Docker to run in is large enough, and that you're not losing or not having issues because the container doesn't have enough room to grow. But that might be an area to check out, because there's a dedicated space for the containers, and I may be butchering the terminology, but that might just be an area to check out. The next thing I want to suggest is the last thing. This is Matt Peterson's YouTube page, and he has an excellent tutorial to get the Plex DB repair script running under Unraid. Now, this script was designed by Chuck PA from Plex's forums, the Plex employee who's the resident Linux expert. Chuck is fantastic. And if my comparative troubleshooting steps don't help you, I would take your issue right to the forum and try to attract the attention of Chuck PA. He deals with Synology NAS units, he deals with QNAP NAS, he deals with Unraid. He is the Plex Linux GOAT. So anyway, this script, when it runs, it will check your database for any errors, and it has repair options too. So that's kind of how my mind works. Run a full test on your memory, even if it takes 2 days. Run the extended test on your NVMe, even if it takes a while. If Plex is still crashing, remove your media from Plex and point it to some test media somewhere else. USB, network, I don't care. Just try something different. Compare your setup for your container with my setup. Mine's been perfect. And then try this database repair tool, and then if you still can't get relief and get Plex running easily, take your issue to Chuck PA at the Plex's forums and let him know everything you've done so far, and I'm sure he's going to be able to help you out. So, I hope you keep me posted. I'm not an Unraid expert, but I've used Unraid for about 1.5 years, and I'm very impressed by it. I am a Synology guy. My media will probably always be on a Synology NAS, and Unraid just is, to me, a perfect mesh for my setup. Let me just bring that in before I end this video. So, I used these unassigned devices mounts. I also run channels DVR alongside Plex and record back to my Synology NAS. So this is the mount for that. This is the mount for Plex, and this is just a test mount in case I need to play around with something with my regular Unraid little Docker host only install. Let me show you the containers here. Let's go to the advanced view, show more settings. Now, when I originally set my Docker container up, there's all kinds of different advice to follow when you're learning how to use Docker containers on a Synology NAS. Well, the guide I was trying to learn from had a separate path for each type of Plex library. So that's how I set my Sino NAS up. And I just extended that when I moved the container. And I really should have just used one path to my shared media folder. And I could have just pointed the libraries where they needed to have been pointed at. And I would not have lost any of my original metadata. So this may look goofy to some, it may look normal to others, but I would do it with just one path to my shared media folder on the Synology NAS. And this is really nice. I can see my main collection. I can go in. It just all works really nice once this connection's set up. So I also have set this up so that, let's go to dashboard. I have a nice CyberPower UPS plugged into my Synology DS1520 Plus NAS with a USB cable. And I have that shut down gracefully 2 minutes after losing power or 3 minutes after losing power. Well, I can put the IP address of this Unraid setup into the control panel settings of my Synology NAS under the power applet, and I can extend the commands to this NUC running Unraid after I installed the NUT protocol, and it shuts down gracefully. But that created a problem. This little NUC starts up almost instantly with Unraid, a lot faster than my Synology NAS, and I need the NAS to be sharing files first. So I went into the settings and delayed the unassigned devices from mounting to 3 minutes. And then where am I? Then I delayed my containers. So I installed this speed test app. This really just tests the speed of your network back to the server. So I can, on my computer or any device with a web browser, I can access this speed test here at the URL, and it'll tell me how fast my local infrastructure is back to this. So this is a sacrificial container. I needed something stupid or something innocuous, this isn't really stupid, to then set a delay of 300 seconds. I learned the hard way that this delays the next container, not the first one from starting up. So I got a little test Minecraft server for my adult sons we were playing around with that waits 5 seconds before the next container starts up. So then Tautuli delays things another 30 seconds. I don't really use this gaps, it was just something neat to look at. And another 30-second delay. I've got FileBot on the network in case I need to use FileBot while I'm away from home. 10-second delay. This little test container, another 10-second delay. Channels DVR, 10 seconds delay. And then finally my Plex server starts up. So by the time these two start up, I am guaranteed that my Synology NAS is up and serving up its media. So I really like Unraid. I'm very impressed by it. It's been great to me. I haven't had a single issue besides my original cache pool drives. My NUC only has one NVMe drive and one SATA SSD. That's all it's got. So I used, I think it was a Sabrent Rocket drive, 500 gigabytes, and I had a fairly new Crucial SSD, and I think it's an MX500. And Unraid didn't really like that, and eventually that drive went bad. So when that happened, I got a Western Digital Red in both form factors, and everything's been fine since then. And just like on a Synology NAS with a bad drive, the redundancy here is beautiful. I didn't lose any metadata. It was interesting though, when the drive went bad, my container crashed. So thinking about that, maybe that's what might be going on. And even if your smart test on your drives don't show anything. If you're not using good drives, and I would say NAS quality drives, so I think the only thing I would use is Western Digital Red ones, or maybe some good Samsung Evo drives. I don't know if I'd use just a plain Crucial um, NVMe drive. I use them on my desktop top computer. I don't know if I'd use a Western Digital Blue or that sort of stuff. I think I would want Western Digital Red. Um, you can't get a Seagate Iron Wolf anymore for an SSD or an NVMe. I think I would stick to some good drives like that, and maybe even pull one out at a time, put in a different system, and run a test right from the manufacturer if you really want to go overboard besides the option that Unraid gives you right here. Um, so anyway, my train of thought was broken when one of my original drives in the cache pool went bad. The container stopped, and when I removed it, everything was fine, and I ordered the 2 new Western Digital drives, put in the SATA one first, everything synced up, shut the server down, swapped over the NVMe for the new Western Digital Red, booted back up, and that's been my only problem. So my container did crash when the drive went bad. And of course, by that point, it was too late to test. And the regular smart test that runs didn't turn anything up. So memory drives, check your database, compare your settings, and this is way too long now. So keep me posted. Let me know what happens. Let me know if you get relief. And your last resort should be Chuck PA at Plex's forums. Thanks for watching.